like to welcome everyone to the latest speaker, Dr. Bud Hall, who's speaking to the Centre for Inquiry Canada Victoria chapter, who's organized this event. Some introduction for Dr. Hall. Bud is co-chair of the UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education, and Professor Emeritus of Community Development in the School of Public Administration at the University of Victoria. Bud's participated in the historic symposia on participatory action research organized by the late Dr. Orlando Falborda in Cartagena in 1977, 1997, and 2017. He was a founding director of the University of Victoria Office of Community-Based Research, former Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Victoria, and Bud Hall has also served as a chair of the Adult Education Department at the University of Toronto from 1995 to 2001, and as Secretary General of the International Council for Adult Education from 1979 to 1991. He has done both theoretical and practical work for over 40 years in various aspects of community-based adult education and learning and participatory research. He served as president, chair, or vice president of the Canadian Association for the Study of Adult Education and the International Council for Adult Education. He's a member of the International Adult Education Hall of Fame and was selected for the 2005 Canadian Bureau of International Education Innovation in International Education Award. Bud has several books out. His most recent books include Learning and Education for a Better World, The Role of Social Movements, published by Sense Publishing, as well as Knowledge, Democracy, and Action, Community University Research Partnerships in Global Perspectives for Manchester University Press, and Learning Community-Based Research by U of Toronto Press, and Strengthening Community University Research Partnerships Global Perspectives by UVic and Priya Press. Bud Hall is considered one of Canada's leading specialists in the field of community university engagement. His talk, Towards a New Architecture of Knowledge, Evolution of Community University Engagement in Canada, will review developments in Canada and at the University of Victoria in the field of community university engagement. His talk will cover various dimensions of community university engagement, outreach of what is called open science, engaged learning where students learn through engagement in community organizations, and community-based research where community knowledge is combined with academic knowledge to respond to community-originated challenges. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Bud Hall.
I think with that, I think our time must be about up, Farley. Oh, well, anyway, it's too bad my mom passed away. She would have loved to have heard all of that stuff. Thank you. Thanks, Farley, for inviting me. And thanks, Honor, for helping us get the thing going. And thanks, Sophie, for being online. And thanks, whoever may be listening to the YouTube the video later on. I always start, as we do here in the West Coast, with an acknowledgement, land acknowledgement. I always like to acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people. That's the Sungis and the Esquimalt and the Sinchothan speaking peoples. Those are the peoples of Wasanich Peninsula. And am, as Farley said, my principal work these days is with UNESCO and building capacity in the field of community-based research in different parts of the world. Let me share my screen and um, we the subject of it's interesting that Center for Inquiry would be interested in in what's going on in terms of community university engagement, because it's a it's a trend in higher education that's it's been quite pronounced over the last 15 to 20 years. Um, and I've got a number of ideas why that is so. And I think it's one of the more interesting developments in higher education. It's basically, we're talking about a transformation of universities away from the old ivory tower concept to a much more integrated, engaged, organic relationship with the community. So if we look at the kind of things that we're facing in the world today, we have all kinds of challenges. Globalization, which is very uneven, lots of gaps between the rich and the poor. We've got a climate crisis, which is ferocious. We've got issues of global citizenship, peace and conflict, which we're only too aware of. We've got issues around human rights, immigration, social inclusion. We have real, challenges in terms of maintaining democratic governance. Only have to, tune into the U.S. News stations to see how fragile something like democracy can be these days. And of course, all of us around the world have been affected by the COVID pandemic. Higher education is like all of the human spaces, whether it's religion or government or schooling or or any area of human interaction. There are spaces of contestation. So there are different perspectives and different people and different ideas about what higher education should look like. So if we take a look at, if you think about the universities that you've been associated with, and I'm thinking now about UVic, you've got you've got more you've got more democratic and less democratic contestation going on. In terms of the more democratic, well, this theme which we're talking about tonight, civic engagement, is certainly one of those. There's quite a lot on curriculum reform going on. The issue of around indigenization of the curriculum, making sure that that in terms of the response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, what people are calling service learning, which I'll come back to, which is a form of engagement for the students to actually be learning in community rather than simply sitting in the classroom. And of course, the field I work in is community-based research, which is the co-construction of knowledge between academics and people working and living in communities. But you also have, it's not just these kind of democratic and engagement things that are going on. You also have other forces which are affecting the space, the higher education space. So we've got very powerful, market orientations, markets that would like to see our students, shaped in certain ways. We have very direct corporate influences in universities. We have an increase in tuition fees, but at the same time, a decline across Canada of public support, from the provinces to the higher education. And we've also got less democratic. We have a dependency on, on English and French in Canada. and to the exclusion often of other languages, including our own, indigenous languages. But I've labeled here as a transformative idea, because in locations where higher education institutions exist, universities or colleges, the collective resources of these institutions, universities and colleges, if you think about all of the students, the academic staff, facilities, the networks, the funding that they have, knowledge and skills, they represent quite a large and untapped resource for community well-being. Universities, as long as they have been institutions unto themselves, all of these resources have been directed internally. But there are a lot of assets that these institutions have, so that if a little bit of that gaze from the higher education institution were to be directed at issues facing the communities where they are located, where the institutions are located, they represent a sizable resource for for change. And oops, what the heck happened? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but the screen sharing isn't coming through.
My my screen has gone black suddenly.
I still have the screen, no problem.
But I can't see it. Now, I wonder why that is. Let me see if I can.
Okay, email.
Oh, there it comes back. Okay. All right, that's a strange thing. Anyway, but some of the challenges here. Let's see. Let me admit, Sophie. Some of the challenges are that the structures of academic life, the way that work is organized, academic work is organized, it takes the gaze away from the local. A career is much more likely, an academic career will go better if you actually don't pay too much attention to what's going on where you're located, but you pay a lot of attention to what your colleagues in London, Toronto, New York, New Delhi, and so forth. So there's a tremendous pressure inside the academy to produce knowledge of certain kinds and for very limited audiences. And that's something that we're challenging. And I'd be happy to talk more about what it takes, but it is a challenge. Because
Excuse me, before we get into that, can you please stop sharing your screen and then restart sharing it? Because I believe it's frozen on
okay,
others. So let's just, yeah, if you do that, if you just restart it. My apologies for interrupting.
that's all right. How's that?
Okay, that's
Yes.
that's good.
Is that better? Okay. So community groups are also historically skeptical about the value of academic knowledge. There's academics who have specialized in very abstract and kind of complex ways of expressing ideas are not always the most sought after partners when local changes is being sought. Continuing education units, which have a job, which are structured to reach out and provide education in communities, are often marginalized inside the university. So they're not seen as the powerful faculties. That's the same at UVic as it is in most of the universities. Even though we've got 16,000 adult students in continuing studies, when people think of the university, they think of faculties of social sciences or science and engineering, history and philosophy. They don't think of continuing studies very often. But my work over the last really 20 years, and to this pendulum swing back, as I say here on this slide. And you will now find, if you look at the strategic plans or the websites of the universities across Canada, you'll find almost every single university by now, will say something about community university engagement. And this is a big change. 15 years ago, when we first got interested in this at UVic, we were, among the few, and now nearly every university, we've got what, 90 some universities in Canada, and they almost all have something to say. And we've seen the creation of new structures to support community university engagement. So some of these are, service learning, which means providing opportunities for students, to learn while being engaged in community work, or community-based research, where academics and people working in community organizations, in local government, and so forth, work together to create knowledge to solve local problems. And of course, we've got new forms of distance learning, especially during COVID. That's practically the only thing we do now. But there's an increased interest. Universities are being challenged now to demonstrate impact in these areas: social, cultural, sustainable, to establish. And so they are having to create, to figure out how to respond. The communities, the public, society is in a sense renegotiating its relationships with universities, and are not satisfied with the universities simply being a place for middle-class kids to go to school. They want more. Everybody pays the taxes, not everybody benefits. So what can we do about it? Community university engagement. I won't read it. You can read that. This is basically making the point about the partnership. It's a partnership of university knowledge and resources with those outside the university, and it's a way of contributing to the public good. Universities are talked about sometimes, and in economic terms, as contributing to private good, in that if I go to university, I'll get a job and I'll make more money and so forth. Or they are also talked about in producing values which are public good. So these are, better, more equity, better welfare, better housing, better transportation systems, all of these things which are good for the public. How do you know if you're a university, if you're those of you who would be listening to this later on, maybe in some other part of the country, how do you know whether your university, the university that you're associated with, is an engaged university or not? And so here's a few criteria that you can take a look at. So is the mission of the university, does it actually speak to it? Is the community involved in various aspects of university life in permanent, continuous, and authentic ways? It's not just, invite you in for a meeting and then see you later. Does the curriculum have a way for students to engage in the community? Does it have a policy environment? In other words, is there support for people who would like to make a career in in community university engagement as part of their scholarship? Are there people, has the university appointed people to play leadership roles to champion this work? And do the approach to scholarship, is it more interdisciplinary? In other words, is the work celebrated and publicized, and obviously it has to be held to a higher a strong sense of excellence. So at the University of Victoria, this is our definition. This comes from our mission statement for the university. So what do we say about it? We say our goal is to engage our university community and external partners to develop and nurture mutually beneficial, inclusive, and strategic partnerships that positively impact people and the planet. And we do that in these 5 different, these are all different forms of community university engagement. So the top one is the community engaged learning, or the other word I used earlier was service learning. It's the same thing if you hear those 2 terms. Community engaged learning. So we have nearly all of our undergraduate students at UVic have an opportunity to engage with a community organization. It could be a United Way type of organization, or housing organization, or child welfare, or working with one of our indigenous communities, or it could be in the planning, in city planning, or different different businesses and so forth. So we have a commitment, a real commitment at UVic to allow students to learn from by learning in community, and the community becomes the classroom. The second area is community-based research, and this is this is the area which I specialize in. And the idea here is that knowledge is created in community by organizations, by local government, by people living their daily lives in the course of trying to to make the community a better place. So, for example, the United Way in Victoria, it creates knowledge about poverty, creates knowledge about inclusion, creates knowledge about issues around housing affordability in the context of working with those communities and those needs. And so community-based research is where academics who have an academic awareness or knowledge about, let's say, about housing affordability could work with people who are on the ground, involved in issues of trying to provide housing, for people in low-income folks in Victoria, and so it's quite a big. It's an area that's it's an important trend in the field of research, and the University of Victoria is extremely well placed and well grounded in this area. Knowledge mobilization. What do they mean by that? Knowledge mobilization means the typical academic project is one: you do your research, you write your book, you send your paper to a conference. Conference is made up of other academics who are just there waiting to have a chance to talk about their book. They're not particularly interested in your book unless you're a big, superstar in the field. And we publish in journals that not even our mothers read, and that's that. So over the last sort of 15, 20 years in Canada, we've been really pushing this idea of knowledge mobilization, getting the knowledge out to people in the community who might be able to use it. And you see that, in population health. You see that in, Indigenous law, in environmental law. You see that in, working in in community development, all kinds of areas. Community relations. This is the business of forming and creating and sustaining ongoing permanent partnerships. A university like Victoria is organically linked to, to local government, to provincial government, to indigenous communities, into a whole network of organizations, and the community relations is the place, is the word that they use at UVic to maintain that. And then another part of engagement is global engagement, because as we know, with certainly we've experienced with COVID or climate crisis, or any of these big grand challenges, we're not going to solve it certainly by ourselves in Victoria, and we're not even going to solve it by ourselves in Canada. So being part of global networks is really important. This slide just goes, whoops, there, just goes into it a little bit more deeply, and I don't need to go into that. I don't need to go into that too much. If you're interested in more information about community university engagement, if you click on the link there, that takes you straight to the section of the UVic webpage that talks about it, and you'll see the name of the person. We have a special advisor on community university engagement, and you can see her name there as well. She's always available, happy to talk to anybody. So I thought that I just give you that kind of short overview on the field of community engagement, and then just see what you'd be interested in hearing more about. So thanks very much. I'll stop the sharing here so we can. There we go.
All right. Thank you very much for this enlightening and entertaining presentation. Yes, Farley, we are at you.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting, Bud, and it's always been an area, I think, as we spoke on the phone a few weeks ago, that's always been a keen interest of mine, with my interest in community development and having taught in a university setting and having advised graduate students. So I put a few questions down because I'm really wondering what the future is for community university engagement, and whether you see things moving upwards, in a positive light. And I've listed a few questions for, if you could respond to them, and I'll read those.
That's in the chat.
Yeah, it's right in the chat, Bod. And the first one is the use of the practicum, as opposed to the thesis. Is it being used more in professional programs to get more students out into the community, almost in a co-op manner? That was the first question.
Well, the answer is yes. And you see it in several places. For example, the master's degree in community development that I, up until I retired last year, I've been involved with. The students who take that are almost all sort of mid-career people who are working in various community settings in local government, or community organizations, or networks, or funding agencies, or whatever. And they are, for the most part, they are interested in knowledge which is of practical nature, which is going to help them work together better in their own communities. So we work with them on a we don't call it a practicum, but it's a community-based research project. They have a partnership. They have to develop a partnership with a community organization, and somebody from that community organization actually becomes part of the supervisory team. And so the student works with that organization to provide them with information that they are interested in, that is useful to them. So they, maybe they're a organization, a membership organization, which has seen membership fall away. So they want somebody to come in and do some needs assessment for and so they're looking for help them identify funding sources for the work that they do. And those practical projects, every student in community development has to fulfill one of those, and they're terrific. They're very interesting. I've really enjoyed working with students on those. They're about 50-60 pages, not 100 or 150 that you get in a master's thesis. They might have a little bit of professional literature associated, but not a highly theoretical one. The same is true in all of the professional fields, whether it's law or it's social work or it's child and youth care or it's education, or it's engineering, or it's public health, or it's nursing. All of the professions are, have really adapted their student experience to finding out what community organizations want. And so rather than just shoveling a bunch of students onto them, making their work harder, they're already busy. So there's been a lot of negotiating been going on by UVic over the last number of years to get to know these community organizations, depending on the field, really well, so that they can count on having a permanent partnership with some part of the university.
Okay. So my next question, Bud, was, do you think the typical model that universities have used physically in terms of the campus complex, do you see that as being altered at some point to what I would refer to, my background's in community planning, to one of a floating campus wherein faculties can strategically be situated within various community settings? So you no longer have a university that is a single entity, but a series of let's say, satellite faculties or satellite buildings that operate within settings that are most conducive to the kind of learning the students should be going through.
Yeah, that's a terrific question, and really, it's a really important question. Let me just say a word or two about the history of this, what you call the campus complex. So in the medieval times in England, I don't know about it in Italy, but in England, there was this movement that they called the clearances. So what happened was that they discovered that people with power discovered that if they put fences up around the commons, that they could actually make a lot of money, because the enclosures became this is where private property came from. So you have then owners and landowners. Well, interestingly enough, at the same time, universities, and the Oxford and Cambridge, for example, they started their medieval universities, and they had this idea. Well, if it works for enclosures, good for for society, maybe we should have enclosures for learning. And so they started building. And if you've been to any of those medieval universities, they're all old. You can't get in. You have to have special permit to get in and all of that. So what happened is they created not, it's not landed and landless, but knowers and non-knowers. So suddenly not suddenly, but over a period of the evolution, 100 years or so, these universities. And so the idea evolved that that learning was the further away you were from society, the more you could learn. Now, that's been, I'll tell you, that's probably been challenged more by COVID than almost anything else that we've seen, because now we're all working home. So in our communities, so the university, UVic, is mostly just empty buildings, and so there's no avoiding our community because we're part of it. So there's so you've got, it depends a little bit on the history of the university. If you take a university like Ryerson in Toronto, it's an urban university. It's right in the middle of downtown. It's technical, it's practical, and it's just what you're saying. It's got a campus here, a campus there. It's all over the place, and it could be in a, part of it, engineering could be in a factory. The hospitality could be in a, in a restaurant food area. So it's very organic and very very interesting, very creative in that way. A place like UVic, a place like is really created. It's the campus, it's the university on the hill idea. And even though Victoria, we're not far, 15 minutes from downtown, we're not far, but there is a sense that the university is apart from the university, from the community. And even though we have now made tremendous progress in terms of making linkages, there's still a sense that we are, from a planning perspective, or an architectural perspective, we're part of that, the town and gown, ivory tower model, and so, for example, we've had a lot of discussions inside UVic about, having campuses in different parts of downtown, and depends on who the administration is. Some of the presidents like it, some of them don't, but it's not been, for UVic, it hasn't gone very far. SFU, if you take a look at SFU, where their president, Andrew Petter, was a good former president, now good friend of mine, they have campuses all over. So they've got their building on the hill, up on Burnaby Mountain there, and then they've got campuses all over the place. Surrey, here and there, in the downtown east side, and all of that. So I like Manchester University in England, Queen Mary's University in London. These are all universities. I love those. I love those types of universities. And I think that it does make sense if you think about the future, planning higher education, and if you're talking quite literally about the architecture of higher education, I think that distributed, organic, community, physically community-based model, it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. My last question is this, Bud. Is there a more concerted effort nowadays to promote university community engagement in respect of technology transfer? So from my background, I always think in terms of building design and development, and the
tech transfer people.
Yeah.
They got into this sooner than anybody else. I would say it's probably. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No. Did you? No. Were you? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just mentioning in terms of, like I said, building, design, development. I know the only added thing I was going to say was, I know there's always been a problem with technology transfer. I know in Europe, technology transfer in certain areas in engineering, for example, it moves a lot quicker. Product development and transfer of that new product technology, for example, to the construction trades takes so much longer in North America, especially in Canada. It's very slow. In Europe, it's a lot faster. I've often wondered is because, you know, is there a different mentality when it comes to institutes of higher learning in Europe than there is in North America? So just some thoughts you might have in relation to technology transfer.
Yeah, we have invested in Canada, I would say, starting about 35 years ago, we've invested quite heavily in structures and tech transfer units. So most every university in Canada has had a tech transfer unit, and many of them were the sort of the business model for them was that there would be some kind of priming of the pump and some some early work with entrepreneurs, with patents or technology developments that were coming out of laboratory situations at the university that would hook up with entrepreneurs in the city and then create some kind of business opportunities, and that the university would share in the in the profits, and that would be the way in which the unit would would be able to be sustain itself. The that model, that particular model, hasn't turned out to be it hasn't worked very well. And so and I don't know whether it's because we haven't, let's say, the provinces or the feds haven't invested enough on the university side, or whether the the market side hasn't seen it as a very efficient kind of way to get things going. But I agree with you, we haven't done as much as probably they have, in particularly in kind of in Germany and France and some of those places. I don't know about the UK, but and we do have in Victoria, we have we have the technology park, which is a is got a lot of, there's a lot of connections between the university scientific community and the the market, and that actually is the biggest. Our tech park is which is owned by UVic, is the biggest facility like that anywhere in Canada. So I think
I didn't realize that.
we're going in the right direction, but I agree with you. We haven't quite, for whatever reason. Victoria is, though, as you know, Victoria is really economically is really is really going doing. I mean, we're sort of all caught up with COVID, but once the COVID, once we're back to normal, we've really been expanding a lot in terms of industries and the green industries, and what businesses and what people are finding, and this you would, as somebody in planning, businesses want to be in places that are nice, where the schools are good, where the air is clean, where there's parks, it's a nice place for families. That's where they want to. And so if you've got a business that doesn't require, the supply chain is, is a electronic supply chain, then Victoria is a fantastic place. So and our School of Business is very good. I think they're I think they're quite good at moving these kinds of ideas forward.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just Wondering if there's any other questions out there?
Sophie, you have to ask a question. You're still here.
Well, Sophie always asks a question.
Yes,
Come
I
on,
have a
Sophie.
question.
No,
Farley,
Yes.
I have a question.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay, ask it, Sophie.
Dr. Hall, it is a kind of a, I know it is a generalization. I am not an expert at all in this area. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. And maybe you could answer this. It is my impression, as I said, I'm outside this area completely, but it is my impression that lately the community university connections are getting weaker and weaker, worse and worse. The split is getting bigger and bigger between them. University campuses, most of them, for whatever reasons, are moving to the extremes, mostly to the radical left and partly to the radical right. While, of course, community tends to be more moderate, older, wiser people. And what do you think about it? And if you agree with me, do you see any ways to approach it, to fix it, to have it fixed, to improve the connections?
My feeling, Sophie, is actually, and I've been working in this area very, very closely, not only in Canada but also through UNESCO on the international field, and I actually think that we are making some progress. On terms of strengthening the linkages between communities and universities. But when I say that, I don't mean everybody at the university is doing so, because the university is a very, it's got a lot of parts, a lot of people, a lot of, it's very, professors are very, they have their own ideas of what they want to do, what they want to teach. And so you have a tremendous diversity. And so you've got a huge range, of political views, huge range
I
of
would call it out of control.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say so. I would say that here in Victoria, that in the last 15 years, we've really made some strong progress. For example, we have very very strong relationships with the Victoria Foundation, with the United Way, with the various indigenous communities that are all around Victoria, which we didn't have 15, 20 years ago. We didn't have those partners. Some people knew them, but we didn't have them. So and the way to keep that, the way to is to have students working in real community settings, to have professors working with people in community, not just with other professors, to have an office at the university to help make partnerships. So if you're in a community and you have an issue that you think the university could help with, you have some place to go, some place you can call, and they will help you to find somebody. And I think little by little, I think UVic is doing a good job on creating structures to allow the community to be in contact with the university. What I think you're talking about in society, and there is, and it's not as bad in Canada, but I think you're right. If you look around the world, you find what people talk about as polarization. Some people are extreme right, some people are extreme left, And I also worry about all of that. But I think that I think we're doing better in Canada, and I know that the University of Victoria is is reaching out and making some and doing some good work. We have, by the way, in case you didn't hear the news yet, we have a new president. He just started this month at the University of Victoria. His last name is the same as mine, Hall. His first name.
Okay, thank
He
you.
met him yet,
You
but
know,
he's
when I
very
was
interested.
young,
He's
it was
very
long
interested.
ago.
Yes.
When I was young, I thought that the position of a university professor teaching his discipline is an enviable one, is something to desire. It is something above average. Now, when I'm watching the way they're being treated, I think they're martyrs of science or whatever.
Well, it's you know, it's I agree. These are challenging times. These are difficult times.
And what can
And
be done about it? It's getting worse, not better. Or
well,
maybe it's not getting worse, but at least it doesn't get better.
well, I think on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of positive things that are happening. If you look at kind of a big picture, it's can be a bit worrying, but in a practical way, we're the University of Victoria and in the surrounding area are more connected now than they've ever been historically.
Thank you.
But I have
Good.
one thing I'm asking if you could clarify quickly,
Yep.
and that is within. I've been in Victoria 4 years, so I have a good idea how the various educational complexes operate. But I'm wondering, you have the University of Victoria. There's Royal Roads, and I know Royal Roads is making some
Right.
movement out into the community as well. And there's Camosun College. So you have something that's very, very applied in terms of an education. What is the level of coordination among those three institutions of higher learning to deal with the community? Is there a concerted effort?
Well, it's an interesting idea. When I was director of the Office of Community-Based Research, I put forward a proposal to create something which we called a Vancouver Island Community Research Alliance, VICRA. VICRA. And the idea was, and we had, just a second here. We met for about a year or so, and then I moved on to another position. But I'd like to see more. There's quite a lot of collaboration in fields, in education, for example, or in nursing, or in social work.
Mm-hmm.
You see there's a lot of informal. The college, Camosun, feeds a lot of students into UVic. With Royal Roads is a little bit different. They're it's a distance education university, and all of their people are it's everybody teaches and learns online.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not as much collaboration with Royal Roads, between Royal Roads and UVic, as there might be. But having said that, I mean, we all know, for example, I know a lot of people, there, and we do, one of my books, for example, I've written with a colleague from Royal Road. So there's quite a lot of, and we've got a number of research projects. They're very busy. Their model is they're teaching a lot. And they don't have as much time for research as we do, or as Camosun does. But I do think that I would love to see, that idea of the universities and colleges on the island, working together more effectively. It's still something I think that would contribute a lot.
Okay, thank you. If no other questions, I'd like to take the opportunity, Bud, to thank you very much for a very informative talk, and one I was really looking forward to, because it's always been a keen interest of mine, and since we've talked about.
Great.
So I'd like to thank you for your PowerPoint presentation, and for your comments, and for the way you answer the questions. And I hope there's going to be a lot of people interested in the recording. I'm working with one initiative in the community right now, and I'm going to recommend this at our Sunday board meeting.
Okay.
That they look for this, because I think they'd be keenly interested in it.
Okay.
Because we're at the initial planning stages for a major arts performing arts center, and they're formulating
wonderful.
some ties right now with both Royal Roads and University of Victoria. So this is a topic that's very, very dear to me, and I'd like to thank you so much.
That's great.
I'd also like to acknowledge the Speakers Bureau at the University of Victoria, that you so graciously have involved yourself in, Bud. So once again, on behalf of Centre for Inquiry Canada Victoria chapter, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation tonight.
Thank you, Farley. Thanks. Thank you, Sophie, very much for your questions and the patience to listen to me. And thanks, Honor, for hooking us up and recording everything.
Thank you very much. Before we close tonight's event, I would like to remind everyone that CFIC is Canada's only national nonprofit for science and free thought. We hope that those of you who are not already members will consider purchasing a membership. We will include a link to our membership page in the description of this video and through Meetup. I hope that you will consider joining. Not only does your membership provide financial support to CFIC, it also adds your voice to that of others who support science, critical thinking, and secularism. As we grow in numbers, so does our influence with government decision makers and the public opinion that guides them. We advocate for evidence-based decisions on government policy, healthcare, public education, and human rights. If concerns like climate change, blasphemy law, education curriculum, medical pseudoscience are important to you, please become a CFIC member. In today's landscape, there are too many people spreading misinformation and trying to mislead you. Without us, the major influencers will continue to be the large self-interested groups and institutions that benefit from making baseless claims and spreading pseudoscientific nonsense. So please consider a membership. It's only $30 a year. Finally, I would like to thank CFI Victoria volunteers who put this event together. If you would like to volunteer for CFIC, you can sign up on our website. We are going to try unmute all the microphones, and let's give our speaker a big round of applause. And thank you very much again.
Good night.
Take good
Thanks,
care,
everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Good night.